Over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at this card, the Terrible Fire TF1230. First thing we did was build it. Then last week, we created a set of custom 3.1 ROMs. This week though, well, we get to have some fun with it. Because while this is a very impressive 50 MHz 030 accelerator, I think it could maybe do a little bit better. Let's see if we can overclock it. But before we jump in and start increasing this clock speed, we are first of all going to have to find out what the current performance is. So let's power on the machine. And while we're just waiting for it to boot, for anyone who's seen last week's video when we made these custom ROMs, well, there was a little bit of a problem with this drive. I couldn't get OS 3.9 to boot, but that has since been resolved. It's now all working fine. It was nothing to do with the IDE device driver. Rather, it was set patch within OS 3.9, causing a conflict with the SCSI device that I had put in here. Just had to modify the startup sequence to stop set patch from trying to patch the SCSI device. But it's all been sorted, everything is now working fine, and I need to just quickly thank both Stephen Leary, aka Mr. Terrible Fire, and Chucky Gang for helping me out with that. But the Amiga has come up, so let's jump into sysinfo. And speed, 8.77 MIPS. Surely this thing can do better than that. Just let me reset here quickly. And let's just try that again. Yeah, that's more like it. 9.65 MIPS. 9,249 dry stones. And our speed against a stock A1200, well, we are about 7.5 times faster than that. Chip speed, let's just note that one as well. Versus an A600, well, we're about 6.75 times faster than that. But the other thing that I want to test, what about the drive speed? So DHO and speed. Well, this little hard drive connected here is getting about 1.7 megabytes a second. But what would happen if we take that and put it over here? And so with the drive in this position, if we jump into sysinfo again, you can see that it's getting about 2.5 megabytes a second. So it is a bit faster when connected to the accelerator. But it'll just be interesting to see that as we increase the clock speed on the CPU, will that IDE transfer speed on both the accelerator and the motherboard, will that equally increase? In fact, curiosity, what about the actual performance? That was another reset there. What's it going to give us this time? 8.9. So yeah, that just sort of goes to show you the inconsistencies within sysinfo. A slightly different result every time. But look, let's take that 9.6 as the baseline. That's the best performance that we've seen. So let's assume that's what this card can do at 50 megahertz. 9.6 MIPS. Let's see if we can't get it above 10. And yes, technically speaking, the processor that I put on this card is already overclocked. The card's running at 50 megahertz. This is actually only a 40 megahertz chip. So we are going to be trying to push this even further. But if this does fall over due to the higher clock frequency, I do have another idea up my sleeve. But speaking of that clock frequency, how are we going to increase it? Well, this isn't just as simple as jumping into your BIOS and altering a couple of settings. The clock speed on this thing is controlled by this crystal oscillator. This is a 100 megahertz crystal. That's divided by 2 to give us the 50 megahertz clock on the CPU. Now, you may remember some time ago here on the channel, my TF330 which is essentially the same thing as this, but for the CD32. I was able to change its crystal to a 108 megahertz variant to bring up the clock speed to 54. And I just so happen to have some more of those. So I think that is the first place we're going to start. We'll take that off, stick one of these on, and see if the card will come to life at 54 megahertz. So we're going to be using hot air to get this off, but because there's lots of other little surface mounted components in the area, well, we don't want those getting blown off the board while we're trying to remove the crystal. So we'll use a bit of this, the high temperature masking tape or the Captain tape. Just put that over all these other bits and pieces. That should protect them while we're removing the oscillator. Okay, while I'm waiting for the hot air gun to warm up, I'm just going to put a little bit of flux around the crystal here, just where the solder joints are. And then we can try to heat it up and remove it. Right, that's it off. Just going to leave it to cool for a second, then I'll remove all the tape. We'll just clean up those pads quickly with a little bit of desoldering braid, and then we can put the new oscillator on. Right, so just another little bit of flux there, just to help this stuff so it doesn't scratch anything. Then we just give it a very quick clean with a little bit of IPA. I'm just going to stick a big bit of blue tack underneath the card there, just to stop it dancing about. And we can stick the new crystal on. Well, that's it in place. Is it going to work? There's only one way to find out. Card's back in. First test, let's just see if the Amiga starts and if it posts to its kickstart screen. Certainly looks good. Do we get kickstart? Yes. Okay, the Amiga has started, but let's stick the hard drive back in. We'll put it on the motherboard first and let's see if it'll boot. Here we go. Starting to read. Yeah. We're in the workbench. Everything is looking good. Let's jump into sysinfo because we have to check out that speed. So 9.6 was about the best we did before. 10.37. And our dry stones are well up as well. Chip speed versus A600, that remains the same though, 6.75. And our speed compared to a standard A1200, we're now, what, about 8.2 times the speed of it? What about the hard drive? It was about 1.7 before. What is it now? 1.8. So yes, a minor improvement on the access speed in the hard drive, but big improvement on performance here. Let's just take this drive, we'll attach it to the accelerator, to this IDE, just to make sure that everything still works that way. So yes, it has booted again. Let's jump into sysinfo and check out the drive speed. It's crashed. That's odd. I was not expecting that now. Let me just reset. Certainly boots Workbench okay. Let's even try the system speed. Okay, it ran that alright, but our MIPS is well down there. Isn't it 9.47? Why is it doing this? You can see that the CPU megahertz is reported strange as well. It's not running at 60 megahertz, it's running at 54. Let's just try the drive speed one more time. Yeah, okay, worked that time. And it was previously 2.5, it's now up to about 2.75. So, yep, that is faster again with the overclock. Don't really get why this speed test is coming in slower though. Let's swap things over again. And just let me see, running the speed test again. Yeah, okay, 10.38. So I have absolutely no idea whatsoever why it's 10.38 over here and like 9.5 over here. But that's just sysinfo for you. Regardless though, I think we can call this successful. The overclock has worked. System seems to be running. Let's put it to a bit of a test though. Let's give it something to do. I'm just going to leave Road Avenger running for a while, just to see if the system is indeed stable. Okay, it's been running here for about 20 minutes or so and everything seems fine. I moved the hard drive back over to the accelerator just to be sure there were no problems on that IDE, but no, it's fine. This game hits the drive pretty hard, constantly loading video. So if there was any problems here, well, they would manifest in this game and it's been grand. So overclock seems to have worked. It's running happily enough there at 54 megahertz. But let's see if we can't upset it a bit, because I do have some other crystals. These ones are 120 megahertz. So let's swap out to one of these and see if we can get the thing to come to life with a clock speed of 60. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with the whole soldering process again. I'm going to do all that and then it'll just be testing. 120 megahertz crystal fitted, pushing this CPU out to 60. That is quite the overclock for this chip. Remember, that is only a 40 megahertz part, boosting its clock speed by 150%. Will it work? Let's find out together, shall we? Power on. No hard drives connected. Just want to see if the Amiga comes up. Yes. Yes. Okay. It started. Where'd that hard drive go? Let's connect our drive to the motherboard first of all. Will it boot? Starting to. Okay, we are in the workbench. Why is the mouse not working? Oh, it's not plugged in. I was panicking there for a second. Right, sysinfo. Speed. Oh yes! Check this out. 11 MIPS, 10,551 dry stones. Our speed now against the A1200, 8.66 times. It reports our CPU megahertz as 66. But it's definitely just 60. What about the hard drive speed? It was, what, 1.5, then 1.7. What's it going to be now? 1.8. Yep, marginally faster again. But let me take that and stick it over here. because to be honest with you, this is the bit where I think it might fall down. And I say that because back when we did the CD32, the TF330, well, I was able to get the machine to start with the 120 megahertz crystal, putting 60 megahertz onto the chip, but the IDE would not work. Come on, let's think positive though. It is going to work here. And it is. So far, come on. Yes. Sysinfo. Let's just try our speed again. Ooh, even faster again. 11.13 and 10,671. 8.76 times the speed of a stock 1200. What about our drive speed over here though? And yeah, it is marginally faster again. Not a lot though, only about 100k or so. But I am very impressed that the machine is running. I'm very impressed that this chip is running at 60 megahertz. There is a bit of heat in it. Let's give it something to think about though, will we? We'll just try a bit of Road Avenger. Again, I'm going to leave this running for about 10 minutes or so. I just want to keep a wee eye on the temperature of the chip. And also that CPLD. So this has been running now for quite a while. There is a bit of heat in the CPU and that CPLD. The processor is sitting at about 43 degrees. And the CPLD is pretty much the same. But Road Avenger is still running fine there. So everything seems to be stable. Can't believe that chip is running so fast. 125 megahertz crystal. Will this chip work at 62.5? Let's find out. Right, is this going to work? 125 on the crystal, 62.5 on the chip. Again, first test with no hard drives connected. Let's just see if the Amiga starts. No. So it certainly tried. It's generating the video signal and we heard the floppy drive seek once, but it seems as if it has crashed. Let's just try a reset. Nope, no signs of life at all. Let me just try and reseat this card, just in case. Yep, it seems to be dead. 62.5 is obviously too much, but is it too much just for that processor, or is it too much for the whole card? Because I do have another chip that we could test with, and that is one of these. A nice ceramic gold top chip. This is the full version of the processor. The one on the card here at the minute is the EC. That doesn't have the MMU within it. This one does. But more so, this is a 50 megahertz part from the factory. So the hope here is that this thing will have that wee bit more headroom to overclock that wee bit further. Need to get this out though. And unfortunately, I don't have the correct tool for doing so. So it's just going to be a case of a small flathead screwdriver. And just have to slowly work our way around the perimeter. Just lifting it a small bit at a time. Until it comes out. That's it. Pin 1 on this chip is shown by this funky looking gold pattern here, but there is also a dot up there. That's going to go in there like that. And let's see if it will come to life now, running at 62.5. Okay, let's test it. Come on, let's see some life. Power on. Floppy drive, seek. But nothing further. I think it has crashed again. Software failure. Yeah, system is just resetting now, just looping. Let me try and power it off and on again. Nope, it doesn't make any difference. It just does not want to know. There is one other thing I just want to try quickly. So let me do that. Then it will be another test. And if that doesn't work, I think all we can do is revert back to the 120 megahertz crystal and settle for 60 megahertz on the CPU. Actually, be interested to know now if that chip will even run at 60. Well, the other idea didn't work. All I did was try another crystal. Actually had one slightly quicker again. And yes, it was unlikely, but it was worth a try. Just a black screen again though. So I'm currently in the process of sticking the 120 megahertz crystal back on. It will be interesting to see if the gold top chip runs okay at this speed. Well, this is interesting, because if I just power on here, this chip running at the 60 megahertz, it doesn't seem to like it. So it starts to boot, and there's an error on the screen. That's the first time I've seen that error actually. What about if we try a reset? What will it do this time? The last time I tried to boot it, it asked me to insert the workbench, our workbench DHO. And this time we're not even getting anything on the screen, just a black screen. The system has crashed. Well, black chip back in, the 40 megahertz EC variant of our processor, and at the 60 megahertz clock speed, this chip is rock solid. It is fine. It's currently on its 4th pass through the Relic demo. And as you can see, it is running without any problems. Now, it is a little bit hot. 44 degrees now. And similar sort of temperature on the CPLD. Bearing in mind that is open to the air here. Once the case is on, it's going to get even hotter. So before we button everything up, I'm just going to fit a couple of very small heat sinks. Unfortunately, I can't go too big here because the keyboard will hit it. So we'll go for one on the center of the CPU. And we'll stick another one to the CPLD. Even if it only helps reduce the temperature by a couple of degrees, it's certainly worth doing it. So, overclocking the TF1230, or for that matter, I suppose any 030 accelerator, because let's be honest, the weak point here is the processor. It's not the RAM, it's not the CPLD, it's the chip. As we've seen, the gold top, well, 60 megahertz for it was too much. Now, I know that chip will run fine at 54 megahertz. That's because I took it out of the CD32 and it's running at 54 in that machine and it's rock solid. The EC chip, the black top chip that we have in here, well, it's currently running at 60 and it seems to be okay. Although it flakes out when you get to 62, so it's borderline, I would say, at the minute. It hasn't crashed on me, but that's not to say after prolonged use, say a few hours that it won't become unstable. So what I may well do is just turn this back down to 54, put the 108 megahertz crystal back on the board. As to be honest with you, that seems to be about the sweet spot for overclocking one of these chips. And I suppose that in itself begs the question, is it really worth doing it? And to be perfectly honest with you, unless you're really comfortable doing the soldering, because you got to swap out the component on the board to do this, unless you're really comfortable doing that, it's probably not worth the hassle, to be honest. Yeah, it's going to be that wee bit faster. Going to 54 will get your sysinfo result to above 10. Going to the 60, if it works, will get your result to above 11 MIPS. But at the end of the day, it's maybe about 10% faster at most. And are you really going to notice that in Amiga games when the vast majority of them run fine anyway on a stock A500? So as I say, this was really all just for the fun of it today. I suppose we have proved the concept. It will work. I got this one to 60. And should I lay down a bit of a challenge? While I'm saying that it's not really worth doing, can anyone do better? Can anyone get their chip to run faster than that? Obviously do so at your own risk, but if you do and if you get it any faster, please let me know. Equally, I just want to throw in there that if you're thinking of buying one of these cards, you're going to get it at 50 megahertz. Don't be asking the guys that build these to overclock them. They won't do it, and rightly so. If you want to do it, you take it upon your own head to do so. So please, while I've shown this overclocked, don't be hassling the guys that build these things, They're already doing a great job for us, putting the cards together. They don't need the extra hassle of, troubleshooting why it won't work at faster clock speeds. Well, that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed what you've seen, and if you did, I would appreciate a big thumbs up. Why not hit subscribe if you haven't done so already? Still plenty more yet to come here on CRG, and I'll see you next time.